Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and please welcome back to episode 2 of End Economica, the first episode. When we left off, we were still talking about the moon, how the moon is importing resources from the Earth. We just escaped the police, and we learned that we trade in stocks. After all, my dream was to stand at the forefront of humanity. It would be a place where you could only look forward and live by advancing onward. Who cared about what happened to the world behind you? And if I couldn't make this dream come true, then there'd be no reason for me to live. That was why, to put it logically, I'd never worried a single bit about the moon's environment or whatever. What I worried about was how much money I made and how fast I reached my goals. While I was thinking about these things, I passed through the thickly vegetated tunnel towards high ground. Oh, looks cool. Solar panels. And some sort of, the Earth. Sort of globe over the moon. It was a clear day, as it always was. On the other side of the translucent membrane, the visible half of the mist-covered Earth looked small. The sky over the lunar city was wrapped in a see-through dome, and right beyond it was outer space. Gravity was weak on the moon, so you couldn't naturally keep large amounts of gases stored up on the surface. Also, why apparently each 24-hour day on Earth had a morning, afternoon, and night, which was followed the next day by another morning, the moon alternated between 2 weekdays and 2 weeknights. However, the human body cycle was set differently thanks to tens of thousands of years of living on Earth. Because most of the people living on the moon were immigrants from Earth, its dome was adjusted to give off light in an Earth-like way. If it even had sprinklers attached to it so that it would rain. However, I'd only seen things like downpours and thunderstorms in videos. When it rained here, it was always just a drizzle. Strong winds never blew here. The only winds felt here were the slow, coiling movements of the atmosphere due to centrifugal and Coriolis forces, as well as gentle breeze of the air inside the dome being mechanically circulated. I strayed from the street onto a grass-covered cliff and jumped upward with a grunt. I kicked off a tree branch and rotated my body to land on the top of the tunnel. This was a box seat where you can look down on the greater part of the city. I grabbed some beef jerky out of my bag and bit into it. According to the guys who came from Earth, this wasn't at all close to the real thing, but it's the only beef jerky I knew. Cool city in the middle. I suppose these lines are public transportation, some sort of metro or something like that, and a lot of inside city stuff, and a lot of suburbs outside. Looks nice. Mountains. Cool. There were a number of cities on the moon. The one I lived in was the very first city to be created, and I could get a clear view of the whole thing from here. The spot is in front of me, where pointed skyscrapers sprung upward one after the other, was called Newton City. It wasn't like entry here was regulated. However, it had the feel of a special zone where only certain people could enter, since it was full of giant corporate buildings. Even public places like shopping malls and parks were overrun with police and city regulations. Most wealth here was created in Newton City, and you could find famous tycoons with assets worth over 10 billion mools all over the place. If you had that much wealth, you'd undoubtedly be able. You would undoubtedly. Hold on. If you had that much wealth, you would undoubtedly be able to be on the forefront when humanity took its next step. Money could make just about any desire you might have in this world come true. In this world, money ruled all. Like a photograph of the moment a drop of liquid hit a pool of water, a group of skyscrapers stood in the dead center of Newton City, while the buildings around that area were suddenly much shorter. That area was where middle-class people who worked in Newton City lived in. That area was where middle-class people who worked in Newton City lived in. It was called Green City or the White Belt. I think that's wrong. That area where middle-class people who worked in Newton City lived in was called Green City or the White Belt. It was a place full of people who loved words like high society and refinement, the kind of people who claimed to care about grace and harmony, but were really full of nothing but pride and obsessions with upward mobility. Whenever I went there, I felt sick seeing the sterilized rows of small, nicely manicured lawns and white-walled buildings. There wasn't a single piece of garbage on the street, and the only plants around were domesticated trees on the roadside. After that, the buildings in the area around Green City got taller again, but it was a complete jumble. There, power lines dangled messily on the streets and vulgar neon signs lit the area, painting the whole place with a feel of squalor. The area was called the Outer Sections, and while technically they'd all been numbered from 1 to 8, there was no real point. If you considered Newton City the center of everything, the north was full of factories. There you could find silicon dioxide dissolution factories, fertilizer synthesis factories, automated plantations, and so on. On the east side was the village where I lived. That area was notorious for its hard-nosed residents. Here. You could also find settlements of old-timers whom you might call artisans in the area, which made for a countless number of small workshops. Most people didn't have the luxury of being able to do something like transport wooden furniture via orbital elevator, and land was expensive on the moon, so the houses of Green City were small. East is over here, sorry. Just noticed. As a result, handmade furniture created with the size and shape of your house in mind was far more popular than ready-made furniture. I was told that my parents were aiming to live together with plants brought from Earth in exchange for making furniture out of wood. Even though factories existed that used the best scientific advances to maximize harvest rates as much as physically possible, they still grew plants by hand for some reason. They seemed to at least have their customers, but I didn't see a single enjoyable thing about being covered in dirt. It just made me wonder why they even came to the moon in the first place. This wasn't a place for stuff like that. The moon was supposed to be a place where you direct your gaze to the top of the inorganic buildings that lined Newton City. And if I shifted my eyes to the left, I saw an area haunted by those who couldn't keep up in that struggle. Here, when buildings started rusting, no one would bother to repaint them. It had been nicknamed the Red Valley. The reason it was called a valley was because when Newton City was originally built on a flat crater floor, all the low-income earners made the Rocky Mountains surrounding the city their home. And by Rocky Mountains, I don't quite mean something like the harsh mountainous environments you might find on Earth. It was actually closer to what you might call highlands. As a result, the rock was chipped away to increase surface area like a river eroding hills, and many structures could be built in a tight area by terracing the slopes. Furthermore, more space was secured by digging caves into the rocky stretches. It was clearly evident that doing this over and over made for a mess of a city. Not much more than a decade had passed since the city's establishment, and it had already become such a devilish haunt that you wouldn't blame the local government if they just threw up their hands and gave up. As for me, I liked the Red Valley with its level of squalor. While it was true that the people living there could be called outcasts and failures, the place was irresponsible in a good way, and that put me at ease. Of course, I had no intentions of becoming the 20% that lived there. And finally, the area around where I was right now was called the 6th Outer Section. It was not as degenerate as the Red Valley, but it was not quite as productive as the east side of town. This area didn't even have a nickname yet, and its lackadaisical aspects oozed out at every turn. While the buildings were dirty and worn out, it was dotted with small companies who dreamed of Newton City and the occasional decent-looking house, so it wasn't the worst place to live. I stood up, hopped back down to the street and jogged off. The road was paved with neatly shaved limestone rocks. It was chipped and cracked here and there, but no one ever tried to patch it. The rough dirt of the moon had piled up in its recesses. Waterways were occasionally visible, and in them you could see clear running water as well as fish swimming. While hydrogen was available on the moon, there was no water, so once hydrogen had been synthesized into water, it was made sure that every drop remained circulating within the dome. The waterway's final destination was the giant water processing plant under Newton City. In other words, everything was designed to gather in the center of the mortar-shaped city, whether it is people, water, or wealth. From there, everything was disseminated outward. After crossing the intricate waterways and bridges, I passed through a narrow alley and reached my destination. It was called the Lunar Chinese Restaurant. It's run by a Chinese husband and wife with a strong spirit of enterprise who immigrated to the moon. I could sit down here from the early afternoon to whenever and they wouldn't say a word. However, the elderly wife's health had been fading recently, and the woman who sometimes worked at the restaurant in their place was a bit of a pain. While I prayed that she wouldn't be there today, it was in vain, especially on an unlucky day already full of policemen and stock losses. Music! As I opened the frosted glass door, the woman, watching the television placed near the ceiling with her hands resting in her arms, propped up on the counter, lowered her glance listlessly. While I was overcome with the urge to just shut the door and go to another store, the woman raised her voice before I got the chance. Table for... Do I need to do a womanly voice? A higher voice. Table for one! The kitchen was run by the silent, stubborn, elderly husband of the family, so he never showed any signs of affection. Of course, no reply came from the kitchen. Even so, it was too late to leave, so I entered the store with a heavy gate and set up camp in a corner seat. While mountains of hydrocarbons sat at the moon's poles, they still couldn't be used for luxuries such as making plastic. As a result, most of the store's equipment was made from either wood or iron. Both could be gathered in the moon and were easily decomposable by microbes when thrown away. An iron cup was placed with a clang on my tattered wooden table, which was no doubt found in a dump somewhere. The woman beaming then poured me water from high up. The water seemed like it should splash out, but it all stayed in the now perfectly filled cup. You showed up, you delinquent! Crab omelette over fried rice. I made my order bluntly without a proper reply. The woman was about 20 years old and had bright, healthy hair. She had been working here for a while and seemed to know a lot of the customers, so she probably lived in the area. One crab fried! The The woman yelled cheerfully. Okay. The woman yelled cheerfully towards the kitchen. Then, of all the things she could have done, she sat down across from me. Except her body was off to the side and her vision was fixed on the TV, she seemed interested in some plot point in the drama she was watching. I heard that actor there is in the area right now. He's going to negotiate his next title and bask in space at the same time. A beautiful actress from around here is accompanying him. I didn't ask, but she informed me anyway. I ended up glancing at the screen as I silently took my PC out of my bag. He's a little too handsome though. While that might be true, I stifled my urge to reply with a "so what?" as I placed my PC on the table and switched it on. What? 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 The PC was loaded up with financial information and charts of historical prices for the 4,000 stocks on the Luna Stock Exchange. In order to make a profit tomorrow, I had to find my next target. Oh, want to use our power? I raised my glance after being asked the question and found my eyes meeting the woman's. She had beautiful, almost almond-shaped eyes that were even brighter in color than her hair. She must have led an easy life, I thought to myself. Nevertheless, it would be helpful if I could use the restaurant's electricity, even if I did decide to go back to that half-assed net cafe. The rates were cheaper at night. The problem was that my battery might not last until then. I silently took out my adapter and plugged it into the cord that the woman, still seated, had lazily dragged my way with her foot. As I hugged the ground in order to plug my adapter into the outlets, the woman mischievously twitched the toes in her sandals. What the fuck? Perv! That was what she said to me once I raised my head, but she wasn't even wearing a skirt. Naturally, I ignored it and booted up my PC. After that, the woman stopped messing with me, and the only sounds in the restaurant were the filtered voices from the television and the swinging pots in the kitchen. This was a quiet area without much foot traffic, and it felt like time passed slowly here. The thing that made me go far out of my way to come here, other than the fact that they wouldn't report me to the cops, was this tranquility. What did you eat yesterday? Well, it was pretty tranquil until the woman suddenly asked me a question. What did I had to eat to what I had to eat yesterday have anything to do with you? I ignored her as I stared at my screen, but she wouldn't stop looking at me. Her face, visible from the corner of my eye, didn't make it look like she was particularly interested in the question, but she wouldn't turn away. Defeated, I raised my glance, and at that moment, she grinned. Pasta. I answered, then turned back to my screen. I updated my data while I was in the cafe, so I searched for any corporate news that might affect the market in the next few days. From where? Shh. As I clicked my tongue, the woman's smile, as expected, disappeared. She didn't get mad or stand up though. That doesn't suit you, you know. She said this so seriously that instead of getting mad, I ended up blushing. She's treating me like a complete child. Big Bull Cafe. It was an arrogantly named place for a nearly illegal operation. You see, bulls were a symbol of strong markets. For that reason, they're bronze bulls placed in front of the biggest financial districts in the world, like America's Wall Street or the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, or the Stock Exchange at Frankfurt. Whoa! So for me, the place was good luck. Huh, so Sarol's handmade pasta. Sarold? Wasn't there a real skinny guy there? That guy owns a place. Owns the? I was a little heartbroken at those words. I was sure that he was some loser who worked there by the hour, but to be the owner of a store, big or small, was a fine example of a capitalist. Not only that, I was heartbroken to hear that I was eating his pasta. I mean, it was good. I taught him how to make those. The woman beamed with pride. And we will end this episode right here. And I urgently need to get some water because my throat is getting dry. So, thank you for watching until this point. I'll save again. Oops. And I'll see you as soon as we're back with episode 3. So have a nice day, and excuse me. Have a nice day and goodbye.